everybody, it's Mark from Team Primetime, and today I'm excited to bring you some more Pioneer content, and specifically excited because I'm playing Dimir Control, and this list is a concession to me, understanding that I don't know everything, and when you don't know everything, you should look at kind of a list where someone seems to have it all together. So I pulled this Dimir Control list from John Farrow, also known as Hey Farrow on Twitter. You should give them a follow. But they debuted with this, and I think it's a really cool list. And it eschews some of the cards that I personally love in Dimir Control, and plays some different things. So let's talk about the things it's missing. Notably, no mono black removal spell, so there's no Heartless Act, no Go for the Throat, no Power Word Kill. The only targeted removal spell is Drowning the Loch, so that just kind of gives you a flex counterspell removal spell. The absence of Torrential Gearhulk probably hurts my soul more than anything, but admitting that Torrential Gearhulk oftentimes is just a 6-mana card that sits in your hand, and that Shark Typhoon is just usually better, so playing all 4 of those is the kind of go-to option there. No copies of Censor, and instead playing 2 Change the Equation, 3 Make Disappear, and 2 Negates in the main deck. I definitely realize that a lot of decks will just respect Censor and play around it, but a lot of people will not play around Make Disappear, so I definitely understand the logic there. No Search for Azcanto, playing all 4 Considers, 2 Thoughtseizes in the entire 75. I definitely think that's an interesting choice, but we're going to play it and see how it goes. I did make 2 changes in the mana base. I really like playing a Hive of the Eye Tyrant, so I cut 1 pathway to add that. And I really like Field of Ruin, where this list played 2 Fabled Passages. I cut 1 passage to add another Field of Ruin. Kept the same number of fetch targets. This is a pretty normal 25 land mana base. 4 Watery Grave, 4 Shipwreck Marsh, your spell lands are just Otawara. Without Torrential Gearhulk, there's no need to have Takanuma, so I think that's a really interesting change in the list. We go to the sideboard. It's got the good setup of having 5 creatures to bring in. Kalitas is lights out in a lot of matchups. Sheoldred does Sheoldred things, and post board, when there's really no removal against the control deck, Sheoldred can just carry games away. Chromehost Seed Shark. I think this card is a card I'm going to learn to love, and I'm very interested in playing with it. I tried it out in my Lutri video, and my one that just had Mon cards in it, and I didn't really get to showcase it that well, so I'm hoping I get to do it in this league. Mystical Disputes, Negates, pretty normal. Siphon Insight, I think is really cool for the mid-range matchups. I think it can get a lot of value. Path of Peril as a concession that some decks are just faster. It's probably the lowest to the ground board wipe that black has access to. Noxious Grasp instead of Array of Enfeeblement. I think that just gives you more coverage to the Planeswalkers. I kind of like it. And 1 Pithing Needle. This is a spot that I don't know if I'm completely in love with. But, we'll see how it works. And, I don't know, give it a shot. As always, y'all know to like, comment, subscribe. Give me feedback on the video, and I look forward to seeing y'all in round 1. Playing some Dimir Control, get excited. We're in round number 1. I won the die roll. My opponent has mulliganed to 6 cards, I'm keeping 7. This is a really good looking 7-card hand. Drowning the Loch's kind of awkward, but Sheoldred's Edict might get to turn it on. My opponent has Botanical Sanctum into Lovestruck Beast, which I think is just pretty weird. I've never seen this before. Luminarch Aspirant maybe thinks we're going to see some kind of Collected Company Taxes style effect. So we're just going to take care of the Aspirant right there. So now I have Fatal Push and Drowning the Loch, so I think we're kind of on to something here. Being able to field... Okay, well, that's a very quick game 1. I get a Field Ruin the Temple Garden, and I guess it's going to be a Stone Rain, so my opponent just decides to scoop that one up. This is a really weird spot, I feel like, as a control deck, right? So your opponents only took, a few game actions and they concede. And you don't really know what to do. So let's just see what this looks like in game 2, since I'm really not sure what we're doing so far. So having no idea what my opponent was doing in game 1, but I saw creatures, so I thought, okay, well, let me take out some slow stuff and just bring in my more, creature-centric package. So I brought in Kalitas, I brought in the 2 Sheoldreds, and I brought in both my Chrome Host Seed Sharks. I took out the Narset Parter Veils, didn't think that was going to do a whole lot. Took out Cling to Dust, took out 2 copies of Negate. So let's run it and see if I made the right decisions. Let's see. This is a pretty good starting hand. Consider Thoughtseizes, Sheoldred. My opponent plays a Shaper's Sanctuary, which is pretty funny, but I don't have any like targeted removal spells yet, so it doesn't really matter. My opponent only has a second land, 2 Archons, and a Disdainful Stroke. So my opponent, I'm thinking, later on, I might cast the Sheoldred. My opponent will be able to Disdainful Stroke that, but maybe it doesn't happen. I get to cast 1 spell a turn. So there's the Archon. I bin the second Consider, even though I could have cast it. But I just, I'm going to slow play this one. We're going to see how it goes here. My opponent taps out for an Archon, which actually opens me up to be able to cast the Sheoldred next turn when my opponent can't really do anything about it, which seems pretty good. Which is why I played the Shipwreck Marsh instead of the Swamp. Just knowing that I was going to have to play a land that came in untapped. So I have Sheoldred. And this is what I was talking about earlier, where Sheoldred might be able to just slowly milk the game. The best thing my opponent could probably have is a probably like a Skyclave Apparition, but I haven't seen that yet, so I don't know if my opponent will do that. At some point, I'm going to want a Fatal Push, but that'll just trigger my opponent's Shaper's Sanctuary, which is really cool because the Sheoldred will deal them 2 damage. So I guess I could kind of use that as to speed up my win condition. So here we go, firing off the Fatal Push. Gonna make my opponent lose 2 more life. That's 1 Archon down. Still have 1 flyer in the air, but I know I have a Shark Typhoon that I can use to block, which seems good. And now there's just no point in attacking. My opponent has a Lovestruck Beast. We're just moving through. I can fire off or change the equation here to get both sides of Lovestruck Beast, which seems like really good value. And I can still make a 1/1 and chump the Archon, which seems like the appropriate path here. I'm gonna trade the. I would trade Sheoldred for Lovestruck Beast here, especially since I have another Sheoldred. Which seems like maybe that would be the wrong play because I know my opponent would still have a Disdainful Stroke. But either way, we're gonna have to slow my opponent down. I don't know what my next draw is gonna be. I don't know what the result of the cycle of Shark Typhoon would be. Let's see. We would draw. I don't know if clicking this works in the replay mode. I guess not. But no, I think that was just a really awkward match, and sometimes Moto Leagues go this way. And I think sometimes RCQs go that way, where you just, you're going to play against somebody's random pile that they think is fun. But either way, that's match 1. We're up, getting the start, with winning the win column feels pretty good. And so far, the list is playing pretty smooth. So we're going to see how things go in match 2. Here I am in match 2. I have lost the die roll, so let's see how this one plays out. This seems like a really fine opening hand. My opponent starts on Thoughtseize, reveals Gigantha. So if you see Gigantha and Thoughtseize, you should think your opponent is on Sacrifice. But I have Fatal Push, Shark Typhoon, Cling to Dust. This just seems in general like a pretty good spot to be in. I'm just going to fire off, not going to let them get any value off this Goblin here. I have Negate. So if my opponent tries to follow up with a second Fable, then that's going to be pretty good. But they just buy Gigantha, so it's a good time to just cycle the Shark, make a 1/1, start working on the clock that I currently don't have. We're making all of our land drops here, so that's not something to really be mad about. We have Field of Ruins to deal with an eventual Den of the Bugbear, so that feels like a good spot. And I could technically field and still negate. So I cling to try to find a removal spell for Gigantha and didn't find it, so that's how the cookie crumbles on that one sometimes. So we're making land drops. We have Make Disappear and Negate. And my opponent has a Gigantha, so they're just getting in there. That's a good time for me to just, chump block. Keep my life total relatively high because, against Sacrifice it comes up. Like, my life total is gonna be relevant throughout this whole match. But I'm going to slam this Shark Typhoon because I know my opponent should have no way to remove Shark Typhoon. And I can eventually start escaping this Cling to Dust and just generating value. I'll take 7 on the nose here. 7 is not going to be the end of the world here. They have a Witch's Oven, but I haven't seen, a cat yet. I haven't seen a Mayhem Devil. I don't really know what my opponent has going on here, but I do know that they're about to have an 8/8 block this Gigantha. So that feels pretty good. And I have Make Disappear that if I have to sacrifice the Shark, that's fine. I mean, I've used it to trade for the Gigantha, so it seems fine. My opponent wants to claim the firstborn here post combat to sacrifice my shark, and I don't want them to do that. I want my 8/8. But they just keep taking my shark. And now they're sacrificing. They took everything I worked hard for, and I don't really appreciate that. But I get to consider here on my end step. We have Make Disappear. We're going to put that land in the graveyard. We have a Sheoldred's Edict. There's going to be a time here where I can get the reflection of the Mirror Breaker off the battlefield when my opponent sacks the Cauldron Familiar. So that seems like a pretty good window to do that, which is what I'm doing here. So I no longer have to worry about this reflection. And my opponent has this kitty that's going to try to do its thing. But I'm going to hold up Cling to Dust, because if they ever try to activate, I'm just going to fire off the Cling to Dust. But now, cycling the Shark, just to put another big body into play, I have a great clock here. I'm about a minute and a half behind my opponent, so I have to start thinking about closing out this game. We're firing in here. Fatal pushes my Shark, Infinite Sadness. You can never really feel great about that. I played the Castle Vantress to start scrying through to find something better. I probably should have played the Hull there though. It would have helped my clock a lot. But I only let them activate the Castle Lockdown once. They play the Informant. I mean, not the Informant, the Unlucky Witness. Then use that to kill one of my Sharks. So I'm just gonna cast this Memory Deluge. Get a 4/4. Pick 2 other good cards. So we're going to start just trying to close. We got a Fatal Push. We got to consider. We're just going to keep making Sharks. My opponent is never going to attack me. And at best, they're, getting 1 damage a turn. So my clock is much better than theirs right now. So while the Witch's Oven, before the food is even made, this is the good play I make this game, definitely. Because I get to exile the Cauldron Familiar before the food ever gets made. So this just felt like a really good play, and it added 3 life to my life total. So definitely can't be mad about that. And then they conceded. What stinks here is I'm 2 minutes behind my opponent. And I historically have problems in the sacrifice matchup on Moto because there's so many things to respond to, and you really have to find your window. So you can't just yield through everything, because there's always going to be this one opening where you're going to have to execute something to get the edge on your opponent. But I'm up, game 1. We're going to talk about some sideboarding for game 2 and see how that one plays out. So, game 2, sideboard against Sacrifice. We know they're going to have a million duress effects post board, so we're just going to cut our Thoughtseizes. We're going to cut Narset Part of Veils because there's not really that many draw effects that it's that useful for us. But we're bringing in all the creatures. We're bringing in the Chrome Host Sea Sharks. We're going to bring in Sheoldreds. We're going to bring in Kalitas. Kalitas is a real haymaker in this matchup because anything they try to send to the graveyard just gets exiled, so that's awesome. We're cutting a Consider and 2 Negates, and we're going to bring in a Cling to Dust because that second Cling to Dust trying to snipe that cat, very important, and a Pithing Needle. Pithing Needle naming Witch's Oven is going to buy us a lot in this matchup. So let's see if any of that plays out here for game 2. Let's see here. It seems like a good opening hand. I mean, it's kind of slow, but I don't know how fast my opponent's opening hand's going to be. But we have, Hall of Storm Giants to be untapped when I need it to. If we could go Kalitas into Ritual of Soot, that's just a really great line. It's going to make us a lot of zombies. So I feel pretty good about that. We have the Chrome Host Sea Shark. So far, I mean, we're just kind of not doing anything. And this hand was maybe just too slow to keep, but it was almost too good to pass up for me. But I'm going to get my Kalitas Thoughtseize, which is kind of the nature of a hand that doesn't do anything to this point. My opponent has 2 Blood Tithe Harvesters, but at some point I'm going to Ritual of Soot, so that feels good. I'm just going to, have to take 6 here on the nose. In theory, I could have considered and try to find a removal spell. There's the Fatal Push, so I kind of could have gotten there. I'm going to discard the Field of Ruin. I'm just going to have to take some damage here. Opponent's going to make a lot of food in the process here. I know I can Ritual of Soot on my turn, and my opponent's not going to be able to just escape Kroxa. So this is fine. But my opponent does have about 1 million food, and I don't know what it is they're planning on doing with it here. Maybe next turn I can set up to Chrome Host Sea Shark plus Fatal Push, and maybe start setting up some incubation tokens, which seems like a good way that I could close out the game. Chrome Host Sea Shark plus Dig Through Time actually sounds even better. So we're going to take that route to success. And a 2/4 will block Cauldron Familiar until the end of time. I do start to see here, though, that I'm at 6, and my opponent has 2 Witch's Ovens and a Cauldron Familiar. So I might just die going that way, and then my opponent resolving the Mayhem Devil here means this game's pretty much over, so I scoop it up. That is a pretty terrible spot to be in, that I lost even after having a few good pieces and kind of stabilizing. But the good thing is I still have 15 minutes on the clock. So keeping the exact same board, let's see how game 3 plays out here. Here we are for game 3. We get to be on the play. We have a hand that has Consider, Chrome Host, Seed Shark. I have 3 lands, Dig Through Time. This seems like a good place to start. My opponent has the Witch's Oven. I consider into a Sheoldred that I can't keep. I need to make land drops. I need to get to Kalitas. It makes more sense than keeping that Sheoldred, I think. My opponent now has Witch's Oven plus Cauldron Familiar, so that really stinks. You never want that to be the case here. But okay, so I have Fabled Passage, so I know I'm going to be able to cast Kalitas. Putting Chrome Host Sea Shark into play is good value. I can get something out of that, and it's definitely at the minimum a good blocker for this Cauldron Familiar, so I get to keep that in play for a while. I should just be able to continue blocking. Thoughtseize, once again, is going to take Kalitas. That feels pretty bad. Sheoldred's Edict cleans up my Chrome Host Seed Shark. What it does do is starts putting enough cards in the graveyard that Dig Through Time starts to become a reality here. It's my turn, and I think that I can go ahead and dig here and try to hit Pithing Needle and maybe stabilize this game. I do find the Needle, and I find a Drown in the Loch, which in this matchup seems pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and Needle this Witch's Oven and try to buy myself a lot of time. So that's the good spot that we're in now. So we're just going to see how much slower this game gets when my opponent is really just attacking for 1 and not gaining any life. I am almost 3 minutes behind my opponent, so that of course never feels good. But my opponent puts a Fabled Mirror Breaker into play. I know the loot could possibly turn on my Drown in the Loch and make it better. My opponent doesn't choose to loot though, so that's just how it goes. But my opponent casualties Ob Nixilis the Adversary in a way that actually is pretty sweet, because it turns on my Make Disappear by them not having mana, and I get the Drown in the Loch. So I even though my opponent has tried to do one of the cool things that their deck gets to do, I have a counterspell for both Ob Nixilis, because otherwise I'm probably dead there. So that's a kind of a good sequence that I had access to. And then I still have another Dig Through Time, so I'm going to just be able to continue to find more answers in this game, so that feels pretty good. My opponent wants to go for a Fable. I say, how about Gnaw? And that actually sets up for me to have a clean Dig Through Time, because I have 4 cards in graveyard. So we're going to do that, and we're going to, Cling to Dust good, Memory Deluge good, Chrome Host Seed Shark very good. So we're definitely in a spot here where we can just Chrome Host, and then have Consider, make an Incubator, and then maybe try to find another land. Definitely trying to Consider into a Fatal Push here would be pretty sweet. The Geier Rechain it, Field of Ruin ain't it. So we have the 2/2, but I know I can trade here, but my opponent just Eaton's alive, so that just kind of stinks. But both times I've had a Shark Typhoon in play, I've just kind of not gotten not Shark Typhoon, a Chrome Host Seed Shark in play. I haven't gotten great use out of it, but I did use the Incubator there just to kind of chump, which was okay. I definitely thought about just hard casting the Shark Typhoon here, like I did in game 1, but I considered how cycling may just be better, or holding up Memory Deluge to find like some removal spells. And while there's nothing in play here, knowing that I can Fatal Push to hit the Shaman token, like fizzle this whole thing, they're going to Deadly Dispute, and that's fine. They have near infinite mana, but I'm not going to get attacked by anything this turn. My opponent goes to Thoughtseize. I'm going to go ahead and fire off Sheoldred's Edict here, and Shark Typhoon's going to go to the graveyard. It's not ideal, but that's the way the cookie crumbles. And then we see a Cauldron Familiar go into play, and I'm down to 7. Oh, and there's another Cauldron Familiar. I'm down to 6, and I'm looking at taking 2 damage a turn just off that. Then an Unlucky Witness. So my opponent just puts a 2-turn clock into play. That is not where we want to be, friends. That is absolutely not where we want to be. Not in game 3. Not down almost 4 minutes. So my opponent's going in for 3. And I know realistically I can take 3. So we're just going to take 3 and just The only thing I feel like we're actually fighting over here is Mayhem Devil, because Mayhem Devil will just end the game. So we're going to flash back the Memory Deluge in our graveyard, and we have a Sheoldred that can start to peel us back into this game. So that seems like a good spot to be in. We're going to Memory Deluge and just find a few more pieces. Change the equation. We'll hard counter Giganta, so that seems like a good spot to be in. So we're not playing the Sheoldred. We're just holding up things. I can cycle a Shark Typhoon to trade and go to 1, which is okay here. And I don't want to trade with the Unlucky Witness because I don't want them to like take 2 more cards off the top. But also hitting the Fatal Push off the cycle means there's 1 less card 1 less damage I have to take. So I'm gonna only take 1 damage here, which is fine. If my opponent had Mayhem Devil, they would have played it already, so that's okay. My opponent just cast Giganta, and that's fine. I'm not gonna lose any sleep over Giganta right now. What I am gonna do is now I'm gonna play Sheoldred because I need a way to trade with Giganta, and then I'm gonna consider draw a card game 2. I have Cling to Dust so that I could draw another card, gain another 2. I'm just using Sheoldred here as a way to stabilize. I'm not using it as a way to win the game because I think I have the means by which to just win the game anyway if I just can drag the game out and find the pieces I need. So here we're going to Cling the Ob Nixilis to draw a card. Just hit a land, so it's not that great. But we're trading off the Sheoldred for Giganta. I see the Witch's Oven, which doesn't matter because I have a Pithing Needle on it. Meathook Massacre is an absolute bomb in this matchup, but I'm at 5. I'm going to take 1, and I'm going to, I'm pretty sure I have a Memory Deluge still in the graveyard. I'm going to flash that back and then try to just dig to more pieces. Okay, so now my opponent is just casualtied. Ob Nixilis, the adversary, so I'm going to see 2 Planeswalkers, and this time I don't have 2 removal spells to deal with it. I do have a Memory Deluge in the graveyard, I believe, to try to go find answers. But first one always makes a 1/1. Second one ticks up. I'm going to ditch the Make Disappear. It doesn't do anything. Thoughtseize is going to take my Meathook Massacre because nothing good can happen for me now. So we're going to flashback this Memory Deluge and, Sheoldred's Edict, Shark Typhoon. Sheoldred's Edict will take care of one of these Ob Nixilis, and the Shark Typhoon could take care of the other one. So first things first, we've got to generate some value. Let's get Shark Typhoon into play. And then now I have Sheoldred's Edict to get rid of one of the Planeswalkers, which is good. And I just did this on my main phase because I don't want them to get kind of any value here. If my opponent, there's no if. So I Fatal Push the Devil token here, knowing that they can just kill the shark I make. But now my opponent is left with, they either have to tick down the Ob Nixilis to make the Devil, or they plus, and I'm going to lose 2. So I'm going to go to 2. The only card that kills me for the rest of this game is Mayhem Devil, and I dodge Mayhem Devil. I guess like it is my job. But I draw to change the equation, which feels awesome, because now I have the counter for the Mayhem Devil no matter what. So I'm going to send the 7/7 at Ob Nixilis, and I'm going to send the 2/2 at my opponent. So there's nothing really left here. I know I'm at 2.5 minutes though, and I got to close this game. So we have to fire off this change the equation on this Fable, and just make a 2/2, and just hope my opponent's last card isn't Mayhem Devil. Just constantly hoping that my opponent's last card is not Mayhem Devil. But I have 11 power in play, so I'm just swinging for the fences. I'm at 2 minutes, and I got to close the game. And I just know that I'm dead if my opponent ever plays a Mayhem Devil. I accept that role, and I just know I've got to beat the clock. So we're just taking game actions quickly, firing them up, getting in there. I just got to hope the top of my opponent's deck is not very good to them. So my opponent just passes the turn back to me. I have no idea if my opponent has anything at all, but we're just going to fire up the Hive. I'm going to hold the 1 card in hand in case I need a counter spell. And with 1 minute and 43 left on the clock, I get there against Sacrifice. That almost never happens to me. If I get to that kind of time differential, I'm almost guaranteed to lose. But it didn't happen that time. So I'm up 2-0 in this league, and it's awesome to get a win over Sacrifice. It's a very tricky matchup. So I'm going to see y'all in round 3. In round 3, we're up 2-0. I won the die roll. My opponent mulligans to 6 cards, and I lost the die roll. My opponent mulliganed. And I think this is a fine start. I've got a Hive, I've got a Fatal Push. My opponent has Razorverge Thicket, Cave of the Frost Dragon. I'm not really sure what that means. I'm just content to hold up Fatal Push or Negate because I don't know what's going to happen yet. And my opponent's first play of the game is Righteous Valkyrie. Not really what I was expecting in terms of angels. I have no way to deal with it because Fatal Push doesn't, hit Righteous Valkyrie here unless I revolt the Shark Typhoon and do that. But now that my opponent has 4 lands in play, I never want to tap off of being able to negate Collected Company, except for when my opponent now tries to cast another Righteous Valkyrie. I'm not going to let 2 Righteous Valkyries exist on the board at the same time. I was born at night, but not last night. So we're going to get Revolt. We're going to Fatal Push this Righteous Valkyrie and have another draw step. So we know we're working our way pretty quickly into this dig through time, so that's pretty good. I can Thoughtseize, see 2 Skyclave Apparition, 1 Skyclave, 2 Kayla's Reconstructions. I don't really care about the Skyclave Apparition. So now I just know I'm playing around 1 Kayla's Reconstruction. I have the negate for that, so I just never have to worry about my opponent going for anything, and they have to go for that on their turn. So I'm still not going to just tap off of being able to counter Collected Company, but now that I know my opponent can't possibly have that in hand, I just start cleaning up cards. This is a pretty good spot to be in. I know I can cast Dig Through Time this turn, and I can just take 2 from this Righteous Valkyrie. It doesn't matter. My opponent's finally going to fire off a Kayla's Reconstruction. I probably should have just used the Make Disappear there while I got good value out of it. But I fired off the Negate there. That was probably a mistake on my part. But I'm just going to fire off Dig Through Time. Well, I would have if I had 2 blue. So I had to Field of Ruin and go get that blue mana. I have Memory Deluge, I have Dig Through Time. No matter what my opponent does, I'm going to have some kind of game action I can take on this turn. So that feels pretty good in general. In general, I think Green-White Angels is a good matchup for me, so I'm more than happy to see that this is how the game is playing. Field of Ruin plus Fatal Push gives me a way to clean up Righteous Valkyrie. That's just kind of the easy take for me, especially since I still have Memory Deluge in hand. I know I have card selection. I could try to resolve a Shark Typhoon, but my opponent probably has access to Beseiju, so I just don't want to risk it. But I will just go ahead and Fatal Push this Righteous Valkyrie and be done with it. I'm tired of taking 2. I'm at 10. It's not the lifestyle I want to live anymore. My opponent goes for Inspiring Overseer. Okay. They're going to gain a life. They're going to draw a card. It's not the end of the world. I could counter the Elvish Mystic, but that doesn't really matter. When I can Memory Deluge and just find Extinction Event, so that seems like the right play there. Extinction Event plus Dig Through Time. I know that I just have the pieces for this game. Drowning the Loch's going to be a hard counter for the whole game, so this game's pretty much a lock, and we're just kind of going through game actions at this point. I don't know if my opponent really has the opportunity to win from here. I have 2 good counter spells, Shark Typhoon and Dig Through Time. I'm not really worried. I'm not going to tap off of being able to counter, so we're just going to keep kind of passing it back and forth here. My opponent, finally goes for the Instep Collected Company. I fire off, finally get that value off the Make Disappear that I didn't earlier. And I'm even keeping like clock parity here, which feels pretty good. There's no reason for me to not just drown this bishop, so I just go for it. Llanowar Elves, sure. Why not? This is a pretty clean spot here for me to just fire up the Dig Through Time, leaving the Memory Deluge so I can flash it back later. So we fire off Dig. We have the Fatal Push for the Llanowar Elves. We have a Hall of Storm Giant, so we have a pretty valid win condition to. This is currently a 3-turn clock, so I feel pretty good about that. We could probably set up on my opponent's instep, cycle a pretty big shark. Resplendent Angel, don't really love seeing that, but I can just drown that if I wanted to. Like Drown plus Shark Typhoon could be realistic, but I'm just gonna flashback Memory Deluge. I am not really at risk of my opponent doing anything like too valuable here, so I could Fatal Push the Llanowar Elves, Sheoldred's Edict to clean up the Resplendent Angel, and that's pretty much a game there. But we're just gonna cast the Shark Typhoon. I know I have a second one, so that's a good spot. My opponent does not have the 6th land to be able to pump the Resplendent Angel, so I'm not worried about that happening. If my opponent tries to go for a Collected Company, or okay, so never mind. The Llanowar Elves counts as their 6th land, duh. But I just get to drown the Resplendent Angel here for just pretty good value, and I have a 2/2. And if you're looking at my hand here, I have the ability to make like 1,000,000 power worth of sharks over the next few turns. So we're pretty much, sitting high on the hog here, firing in with a 2-2. I could probably close the game faster, but there's no real reason. I mean, I still have 19 minutes. And I think the game's pretty much, in my control here. My opponent goes for an angel. I'm just going to go ahead and fatal push the Bishop of Wings. I do not want them gaining life. I do not want that Bishop of Wings on the battlefield when I eventually take care of my opponent's Giada here. We're going to remember. So we make the 1-1, then we make a 4-4. We have Narset and Negate, and then my opponent has a 2-2. Okay. Not really overly concerned here. Consider to make another 1-1. We're just going to bend the consider, figure out what the next card is. Just fire off the Sheoldred's Edict. I'm going to make a 2-2. Like, we're just making an insane amount of power with the sharks here. And then we draw the Sheoldred's Edict off the top. So, like, we can take care of the 2-2 here as well. So that takes care of the 2-2. And then we can fire up the Hall. And then we have 4, 5, 6, 10. We only have, I think, 17 power, so there's no reason to fire in the Hall yet. So we're just going to leave up Negate and Shark Typhoon and just have ourselves in a pretty good position to not worry about losing the game. We can just resolve the Narset here as well. There's no reason not to. Might as well cash in for another card. Get a Make Disappear. My opponent, if they try to cast a Collected Company, this counters that. So that seems pretty good. And we have the Geier Reach Loch. So we're drawn into pieces that are worthwhile. I think anytime most Angels players play against me, this is kind of the feeling they get. This is probably the matchups where, as Dimir Control, I feel in the most control. So getting this for my round 3, where I'm, I guaranteed I'm going to get my play points back, is a pretty good start. We'll talk about sideboarding and see what game 2 is. Sideboarding for game 2, we're going to take out the Narsets. Not really the matchup I want those in. My opponent doesn't draw that many cards, so it doesn't shut that down. Cling to Dust, not that valuable. Change the Equation really only hits like the Elves and Collected Companies, so it's too narrow. We take that out. Take out Negate, even though Negate hits Kayla's Reconstruction and Collected Company, and maybe some sideboard cards. It's still just kind of narrow. Not what I want. I want to bring in some beef. I bring in the Kalidas, I bring in the 2 Sheoldreds, and I bring in the Chrome Host Seed Sharks. That 2/4 blocker in the air lines up pretty well against most of what my opponent's doing. And I bring in an Extinction Event. My opponent is on some creatures that are mostly odds. So that seems correct. And Noxious Grasp kills everything in my opponent's deck. So we're good to go on that front. We're obviously going to go second here. So let's play through and see how it goes here. I have an Extinction Event and the lands to cast it. So I think in my head I say, sure, why not? I will draw something else. If my opponent's going to play mostly odds anyway, it seems fine. And they also mulligan to 5 cards. So I know if I wipe the board once, I'm in a pretty good spot. And my opponent immediately goes odd CMC creature into odd CMC creature. If my opponent plays another odd CMC creature in the next 2 turns, Extinction Event only gets better. And I assume that's what they're going to do when I take 3 here. And when I take 3 here, then my opponent does something in their post-combat main phase. So we see a 4th land. So my opponent could potentially have Collected Company up. But if my opponent Coco's, they're just going to Coco into odd CMC creatures mostly. So I feel good about it. So I Field of Ruin to force the Collected Company here. Because that is that's going to guarantee that on my turn, I get to Extinction Event for the most value. We hit a Bishop of Wings and an Inspiring Overseer, so we get 1 odd and 1 even. But the cool thing about Extinction Event is that when I exile all the Angels, they're not going to make 1/1s to leave behind, so that feels pretty good for me. So I'll take that exchange. Obviously, when we Extinction Event here, we're going to name odd. Don't even think about naming even. It doesn't do anything good for you. And then my opponent just concedes the game. I don't know what's left in my opponent's hand, but obviously I'm in a good spot. I have Dig Through Time. I'm going to make Disappear. I will probably get somewhere good over the course of this match. But the good news is that trying out this list that obviously did well for John Farrow at the United States Regional Championship, it's doing well for me because I'm starting 3-0. So let's see how things look in the 3-0 bracket, and I'll see y'all in round 4. We're here for round 4. We're up 3-0. I won the die roll. Let's see how this game goes. So we're starting off with a decent set of lands here. Starting off with Drown in the Loch in your opening hand does feel awkward all the time. But having Field of Ruin, having Fatal Push, I assumed that I could maybe turn it on here. Well, when my opponent just starts playing all Izzet lands, and I maybe assume it's creativity. And when I see Fable with a Mirror Breaker, it absolutely confirms it's creativity here. When I Field of Ruin my opponent and I don't see an island, at least that lets me know that I'm not going to get my Fatal Push Spell Pierced here. I actually was a little bit concerned. I'm not sure why I fired off the Field of Ruin there, but I do need to be able to turn on Drown in the Loch, so it makes sense. Drown in the Loch still doesn't counter Fable the Mirror Breaker here, but so I fire off Fable, hit that. I probably just have to cling my own card to try to draw into something because right now my hand stinks pretty bad. My opponent now is going to have a flip Fable and be able to creativity and hit a Sublime Epiphany, which is not ideal for me. So we Otawara, the flip Fable. My opponent, activates a Mirrex on my end step, so I have a Might. My opponent can, creativity for some, incredible number right now. I'm just going to take the one in the Toxic. It doesn't really matter. Since my opponent is choosing to either not creativity or not just Gearhulk out an Opus for fear of counterspells, I'm just gonna be content to let them play a slow game. I've never really tried to get the win timing someone out in Moto, but currently I'm doing pretty good on the clock compared to my opponent, so I feel good just letting them kind of go for it. So we're gonna, and I have the Field of Ruin for the Mirrex there. They're not activating the Hall and getting in there, and if they did, I could jump with the Shark Typhoon, so I'm not overly concerned. But I'm cool here to just let my opponent take the slow route. I think over the course of 3 games, I could probably get there. My opponent is creativitying here, the Power Stone. So I'm going to go ahead and cling the Magma Opus to draw a card. I draw a board wipe here, which does nothing in this matchup, so that kind of stinks. But my opponent gets the Gearhulk, Sublime Epiphany, get another Gearhulk, Stern Lesson, play a Fable. I'll get the Ritual of Soot, clean up a couple of things. But now realistically, I'm looking, my opponent can deal 10 to me. I can just cycle Shark Typhoon and Chump, which is also fine. My opponent is definitely taking the slow and steady path here, which I respect. So I'm just going to make the 1-1, Chump one of these Gearhulks, and, live to fight another day. Which seems, I'm at 10. This seems good. My opponent, casts another Fable. So my opponent's going to have, a lot of ways to kind of come at me here. I get the Shark Typhoon. I know I can cycle and do something. I could fire up the Hall to block if I need to. I have a lot of things I can do to prevent my opponent from killing me while I'm up 3 minutes. I'm slowly taxing the clock. At first I noticed I was up a minute, but now so far in game 1 I'm up 3 minutes. So I think I can slowly get there. So we're gonna fire up the Hall, and I'm gonna block one of the Gearhulks. I can cycle a Shark for 1, block the other one, so I can actually kill a Gearhulk and then chump the other one. It seems like a good spot to be in, because I know I have the Hall here. But then my opponent creativity's Power Stone hits another Gearhulk. Stern Lessons, just none of these Gearhulks are game ending, but they're absolutely all value, which is insane. And then Fiery Impulse takes care of my Hall of Storm Giants. So I Narset, try to find something. Extinction Event's real good here, because if I Extinction Event on even, I clean up everything but the Reflection and the Hall. But my opponent has a Make Disappear that obviously I can't pay for all of, so that's not going to get it done. So I'm just going to be content to pass the turn back to them. I'm up 4 minutes on the clock now, and I'm going to make them have to end the game before we get to game 2. I think it's more than reasonable that I could possibly win on time. So I'm just going to let this play, and I'm going to take game actions for my opponent to respond to. My opponent spell pierces, that's fine. So I lose game one up almost 5 minutes on the clock. So we're going to talk about sideboards and see how game two goes. So for creativity, we have a pretty big board plan. So I cut a Ritual of Soot, cut the Meathook Massacre. I left in the Extinction Event, since ultimately a lot of the things I'm going to see are going to be even CMC. I cut 3 Fatal Pushes, leaving 1 for in case I have to snipe a token. I'll cut 2, change the equation. It's not going to really counter a lot, and I feel like they're more of a control deck post board, so the red cards are less important. I shaved 1 Consider just to make room for everything. I brought in 2 Sheoldred. My opponent's going to draw cards, so I definitely want to be able to punish them for that. Cling to Dust to add 1 more to be able to snipe good instants out of the graveyard. 2 Mystical Disputes, 1 Negate. Those are all my counter spells I can bring in to try to fight on that axis. And 2 Chromos Seed Sharks, just a threat to get down early that I can generate value off of. I'm on the play, so let's see how this game goes. This is a terrible opening hand, but I have Thoughtseize and Cling to Dust and a Shark Typhoon. I have 2 lands. I have a Sheoldred. I assume I'm going to get to make land drops. I don't immediately fire off the Thoughtseize, thinking I want to wait a little bit to try to get some value. But here, I'm just going to fire it off and see what my opponent does. If they wanted to make disappear, I could, counter something. Well, I could pay for it. The only counter in my opponent's hand was the make disappear, so I took that. My opponent, treasure cycled the Magma Opus. I went ahead and just went for the cling. That made sense to me to do that. My opponent, I don't think has a way here to. I don't know if my opponent had possibly drawn into a way to counter the Sheoldred. So I didn't bother going for it. Instead, I'm just cycling the Shark Typhoon, doing a few things here. My opponent can just cast the Torrential Gearhulk here, though. And I did not play around that. Because my opponent, puts another Opus into play. Is going to do a lot of things here that I don't like. But, I'm still at 4 minutes. I think I still have, good game actions here. I'm still at 14, so I'm not at a threat of losing here. Putting a Sheoldred into play, Fatal Push the token, seems like a way to just kind of balance out here. I can use the Sheoldred and chump block the Torrential Gearhulk if I wanted to, just to kind of get it off the board. Or I could just throw the Shark in front of it. That seems just fine too. I don't think my opponent has a way to deal 5 damage to something, so leaving the Sheoldred in play just to generate value seems perfectly acceptable to me. Especially since I have a Consider that I can just get value off of. Putting Cling to Dust into my hand against my opponent's deck also seems like a good option. I have Memory Deluge and Edict through time I can fire off. I can get a lot of value here. But I'm going to go for the chump block here. I'm tired of seeing this Gearhulk in my face. I just want to cast the Dig through time. My opponent is unkind and does not allow me to resolve my Dig through time. So I'm just going to cling, take the Stern Lesson, and see if I can keep moving through cards. I have a Negate. Had I clung in response to my opponent's Negate and drawn that Negate, I don't know how that would have went down, but I probably should have done that and tried to find a way to counter. But I didn't, and that's the way the game's playing out now. I'm still up almost 5 minutes on my opponent. I tried a Memory Deluge here. My opponent now is casting Torrential Gearhulk. They're going to try to cast a counter spell out of their graveyard. I'm going to negate their Negate because I want to resolve my Memory Deluge. We see Drown and we get a Negate. This seems good. My opponent only has 4 cards in their graveyard though, which does not do a whole lot for me in terms of getting rid of this Torrential Gearhulk. But I can fire off a Thoughtseize, take my opponent's Hullbreaker Horror, which I would absolutely have no way to deal with currently, and get 1 more card in the graveyard for my opponent so I can eventually drown this Gearhulk. So I am going to take, a swift 6 to the chin here. And now my opponent creativities and hits another Gearhulk. And Prismari Command is going to deal 2 to me. I'm going to go to 5. But this is going to turn, well, they didn't take the loot mode. I was hoping they'd take the loot mode to turn on Drown, but I'm not that fortunate. Here, we're going to see my opponent fire up the Mirix. I activate Geier Reach so that I can drown a Gearhulk while they're tapped out. And now I can still cycle a Shark Typhoon for 1 to chump block this Gearhulk to live to fight another day. But Chandra Awakened Inferno is the card my opponent plays. For all I know, I Geier reached them into it, so that's on me. But that Chandra emblem is the bane of my existence in a lot of matches. So we're gonna see if I find a way out of this. But no, I'm taking 2. I'm taking 1 on my upkeep, and there's the Extinction Event, so I can take care of all the evens, except my opponent Disdainful Strokes. I have to negate back. We're gonna clean up the evens. We have a chance here. I can cycle a Shark for 1, and maybe try to hit my opponent Chandra, so I can stop making emblems. But my other out is that I have Cling to Dust in my graveyard, and I have 11 cards in my graveyard, so I can escape a couple times and try to gain life to live long enough. But my opponent's at 16. Killing them from this spot is going to be very tricky. First Cling, and the trick is that I have to hit the creatures in my opponent's graveyard, so I'm not even drawing cards when I do this, which really stinks. But I'm going up to 9. I'm going to try to buy myself some wiggle room here. Well, going up to 9, back down to 7, and I find the Sheoldred's Edict. So I have a way to clean up this Chandra. But I'm still taking 2 points a turn. I'm going to be able to trade with this Might. So I have a way here. My opponent's Stern Lessons to try to find more gas. And the whole time, so I find a way to deal with this Chandra. And I'm also thinking in my head, my opponent only has 3.5 minutes on the clock. Maybe I can time them out before these Chandra emblems kill me. I do not have enough cards in the graveyard to deal with them right now. But I activate Geier Reach. I have to find a way to put enough cards in the graveyard. I Field of Ruin my opponent's Mirror so they can stop hitting me for 1. I still do not have enough cards in the graveyard to activate Cling to Dust. On my next turn, I'll be able to Geier Reach in my upkeep and activate Cling to stay alive. Technically, I can stay alive because I'm going to go to 1. I don't want to go to 1, but I'm going to go to 1. Except for this cool thing my opponent does, where they make a 7/7 Shark, and end my hopes and dreams real quickly there. I fire up this Hive. We're at the point in the game where I know I'm going to lose, so we're just kind of showing off a little bit. I fire up the Hive and my opponent's Sublime Epiphanies and make another 7/7. Man, tough beats. I had a way out of this game. Like, finding the answer to the Chandra when I found it was pretty clutch. But then my opponent just having a 7/7, sometimes you lose to a massive Shark. A Shark big enough that if your opponent only has 6-sided dice, they have to put 2 of them on the table for 1 token. But we're 3-1 right now. Maybe we can go for a 1. I'll have to see y'all in round 5 to find out. We are in match 5, going for the 4-1. I have lost the die roll. But that doesn't mean I'm going to lose the match. So let's see how this one plays out. This is a fine opening hand. I've got 2 lands, Consider, Change the Equation, Thoughtseize, and I see Hallowed Fountain, which makes me think that I'm either against Control or Spirits, and Control is usually a good matchup for me. But I see Strict Proctor, so I know my opponent's on this Lotus build, right? And I have never actually gotten to play against this Lotus deck, so this is actually really cool for me to see. I'm finding the land drops I need. My opponent hasn't put a Lotus into play, so it's a good spot for me to be in. I'm going to make my land drops, but I have some really dead Fatal Pushes in hands. That stinks. Knowing I had the Fatal Pushes already, I maybe just should have not taken the Strict Proctor. My opponent's going to Discontinuity here. I kind of just want to go ahead and fire off this Field of Ruin. So my opponent has a big mana advantage on me. And here in this game 1, I have Fatal Push, which is a really dead card, and I've Changed the Equation, which is also a really dead card. I'm up almost 2 minutes on my opponent, and I have an answer for Teferi here, so that's good. And I have more cards in hand than my opponent, which is also good. But I'm gonna need to make a 5th land drop. I find Narset here, and I have the Otawara. I could just jam the Narset, and so knowing what I know now, right? So I know that this Lotus deck doesn't play main deck counterspells. The only real counterspell in the deck is Jawari Disruption in game one. I should have jammed this Narset right there on the spot, and I did not. So that's something I kind of learned about this, on the back end. The so just going forward, definitely know if you're playing against like Lotus in this game one. As long as you can pay the one, you're going to be okay. My opponent copies my Hall of the Storm Giants, so I know they're going to be getting in there. My opponent is going to fire up my Hall, and I know I have a Sheoldred's Edict to, I can Edict it away. But my opponent could technically cast Jawari Disruption here, which I'm not thinking about. Excuse me. And yeah, I got. So I'm going to take a healthy 7, and Narset's going down. Good time here to cast Dig Through Time. Try to find some pieces I need here to win. Memory Deluge by itself ain't really it, but I can Fatal Push the Hall of the Storm Giants and pay the ward, which is about as much as I think I can hope for. So my opponent has not activated the Wandering Emperor yet, so I'm going to try to go for the Fatal Push here. I'm going to pay the ward, and then hope that doesn't get Jawari Disruptions. And we got there. Alright, so I'm just going to take 3. I'm down to 6. I have a Memory Deluge. My opponent puts another Lotus Field into play. So my opponent has, 7. My opponent has 9 mana, which might as well be infinite. I now have 2 Fatal Pushes, so I can clean up all the tokens. And I have a Shark Typhoon and a couple of Change the Equations. So I have 1 good card and 2 dead cards. My opponent has, the ability to hardcast a Shark Typhoon here. So I'm not looking so hot at the moment. I have a Hall. I have a Shark Typhoon that I can cycle and try to block anything my opponent does. My opponent's going to make a 4/4 here. Not great for the home team, for sure. So they're going in. They're going to have a 5/5 with first strike. I'm going to have to cycle here and block this Shark. Definitely not trying to trade, because that's first strike. I can make a 6/6, but it just doesn't seem appropriate. I did get the Extinction Event. I can clean up all the tokens, though, so that seems pretty good. But then, to my dismay, my opponent is now resolving its Fairy Time Raveler. Not Time Raveler, I am so sorry. It's a Fairy Hero of Dominaria. And it's going to keep drawing cards. But I started thinking the same thing I was thinking in round 4. I'm going to have a... I might just be able to time my opponent out. I'm up on the clock. I'll make them close. I have the Extinction Event to clean up all the tokens, which seems like a good start. I have Castle Vantress, so I can scry into cards that are actually good. But I'm okay. My opponent, Memory Deluges, they're going to make a 4/4. I have nothing I can do about that. We're going to have to see what we got in the tank for game 2. We're here in game 2. I want to talk about sideboard. I basically boarded exactly the way I would have for regular blue-white control. So I cut all the Fatal Pushes. I cut all 3 Sweepers and Ritual, Extinction Event, Meathook Massacre. And I cut to change the equations. I brought in Negate, Chrome Seed Sharks, Mystical Disputes, Cling to Dust, Noxious Grasp, and 2 Siphon Insights. But since this is a Lotus Field deck, I probably should have also just brought in Pithing Needle to name Thespian Stage. But also, since this deck's win condition is so Planeswalker centric and Teferi is very good, I could have named that as well. But I didn't bring in the Pithing Needle. I brought in the cards I said I did. So let's see how this game plays out. I won the die roll. I have Thoughtseize, Consider, Make Disappear. I can do a few things. I'm game to keep this hand. I know on turn 2, I can Thoughtseize into Consider, try to find another land. So it seems like a good line to take here. I take the Devin's Veto because I can't beat Devin's Veto, so I'm not going to try. My opponent does, though, have a lot of other good cards in hand. I think there was not much in the way of land drops, though. I make my 3rd land drop here, and I'm pretty sure my opponent can't deal with a Chrome Seed Shark. So we're going to put that good friend there into play. And my opponent discontinuities. Cool. My opponent's tapped out. I can swing in here for 2 here. I know my opponent has a Farewell, so I don't want to play too much into making a bunch of incubator tokens, and then my opponent just Farewells them away. That'd feel really bad. Instead, I can just counter the Memory Deluge and then cling it away, and that seems like good value there. Now my opponent just has 2 lands in play, and I have a 2/2, a possible 2/2, a possible 1/1. Play Field of Ruin here seems good. since I know my opponent's going to fare well, I'm just going to get in while the getting's good, and I'm going to swing for 5. If my opponent doesn't fare well, well then I'm just going to keep doing cool stuff. But, you know, as expected, my opponent fared well. I'll know on my next turn I can just play Narset and hold up, you know, something else. So Narset's good. Get in a Negate, obviously good. So we're just gonna, my opponent Thespian stages. I can hold up Field of Ruin until the end of time and not field until my opponent tries to Thespian stage. So that seems like a pretty good plan. My opponent's gonna go for it. This is a good spot for me to just Field of Ruin. We're gonna get our lands, keep moving through. I have Negate and Sheoldred's Edict. My opponent goes for the Wandering Emperor here. This is a fine time for me to just fire off Negate. If my opponent, you know, wants to ferry on their turn, I'll just Sheoldred's Edict and it'll be fine. Which, you know, they do go for the Teferi there. I'm going to wait for the mana pool to clear for the white, because if they tried to Dovin's Veto, I would be having a bad day. But instead, they only have blue up. I know they can only have possibly Mystical Dispute, so not worried about it. I can fire off Sheoldred's Edict. Siphon Insight is going to get to show some all-star rolls here, I hope here. My opponent's going to get to Scry 2 and then Foretell. My opponent blows, you know, their good counter spell here on... no, I tried to drown the Behold the Multiverse. And then, so they just wanted it to resolve. I just want to Siphon. And I get to take a Wandering Emperor, which is good. I now have an extra win condition that I didn't start the game with. Just play the Field of Ruin. We're going to pass the turn. I'm behind on clock now, which feels bad since I was talking such a big game about being ahead on clock. But I have a Wandering Emperor. I have a Shark Typhoon. I'm a flashback to Siphon Insight. I take the Memory Deluge, even though that eventually puts it into their graveyard. But I can put it in their graveyard and then just cling it away, which seems fine. But they're going to Teferi here. Before they untap, I should try to cast something here. The Memory Deluge seems fine. Chrome Host and Dig. Doesn't seem like I could do better than that. So putting... I don't want to really cast anything into a ton of open mana here. But trying to get a Chrome Host down seems fine. My opponent, you know, the cool thing the Lotus deck gets to do is use Discontinuity as a counter spell. So my Chrome Host Seed Shark is, you know, gone forever. If I were smart, I would have, while the Discontinuity was on the stack, I would have clung the Memory Deluge, which I did not do. That was a punt on my part. My opponent here is getting to plus Teferi without drawing a card, and they're just getting to untap their lands, which is cool, I guess, but not really that productive. Before my opponent, you know, gets to untap lands here, I want to put the Wandering Emperor into play, and let's start making tokens. We need to start swinging. My opponent's going to end the turn, you know, which stinks for me, but I think while my opponent's going to attempt to do that, is a good time for me to dig through time. So I know my opponent, if they Mystical Dispute here, I can pay for it. So this is just a good time for me to go for it. Take Mystical Dispute, take Noxious Grasp. I can Dispute here. If they try to Dispute back, I pay for it. I get to play a land. I get the Noxious Grasp my opponent's Teferi here, which is sweet. And I just use the Wandering Emperor. I'm just juicing up the one token. I'm not really diversifying. And then, so my opponent Memory Deluges. They're still trying to find, you know, ways to stay in the game. I think I'm pretty solidly, I feel like I'm in control here. I draw another Siphon Insight, so I'm just going to get to keep finding gas. And I'm slowly hitting them with more and more stuff. I think my best thing to do is probably on my opponent's... so my opponent's going to Memory Deluge here. There's a lot of things I could do here. I could Siphon Insight while they're tapped out. Well, the one thing I don't want to do is try to cycle my Shark Typhoon when they can cast Discontinuity, because that just ends the turn. Taking Dovin's Veto here gives me a lot of things I can do, which I feel good about that. So this Siphon Insight gets me Dovin's Veto and Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. I have the King's Spoils now. That's everything I think you want to hit off Siphon Insight. So we're just going to kind of go for it here. My opponent chooses to Otawara. So my opponent can't cast Discontinuity on my turn. So we're going to go for Teferi here with Dovin backup. My opponent goes to count. Okay, so I have Teferi, the Wandering Emperor, and Narset. I have assembled the Super Friends. My opponent is gonna, probably cycle the shark here. Yeah, I mean makes a 3/3, can kill Narset, which is important because the Lotus deck wants to draw a lot of cards. But I don't really know that it's that important. But my opponent has Thought Distortion, which stinks. But the best thing I can do here is just cycle this shark, just put a body into play, and I'm going to lose the 4 cards in my hand. That's the one thing that's hard for me to remember to play around for the Blue-White Lotus deck is the Thought Distortion. Like, that's not a card that you just instantly think they have, but it's a card they can play, and it's, kind of one that can bone you. But I make a 4/4, so I can block the Shark Typhoon if they're getting frisky. So I draw. I have Hive of the Eye Tyrant. I have Field of Ruin. At this point, we're making tokens. We're trying to close the game out. Motor is starting to bug here, but I do win this game. So we're gonna, see what game 3 is to figure out if we can pick up the 4-1 and see if we can bring it home for John Farrow's Dimir Control list. Here are game 5, not game 5, match 5, game 3. Board didn't change. I'm down to 8 minutes. I'm a minute behind my opponent. I gotta play tight. I just gotta hope I get there. I kept my opening hand just on the back of really having Consider, and the lands that I had in hand were good lands, like having Hive, having Castle, having Field of Ruin. My opponent having a Thespian stage in play already might be bad for me if my opponent can just play Lotus and Discontinuity here, which they don't, which is fine. So now I just get to Consider. Sheoldred's Edict good because Planeswalkers are obviously how my opponent wins the game here. I'm just going to go ahead and Field of Ruin, take care of this Thespian stage here. Just so I don't have to worry about my opponent making multiple Lotuses, but it does give them the extra mana to behold the multiverse, which I was not really considering in the moment. My opponent's, on 3 cards in graveyard, slowly turning on Drowning the Loch. Having Mystical Dispute's a pretty good draw here, because I could potentially dispute something and then drown their counter back. Like disputing here on Memory Deluge seems pretty good, and that gets me the 4th card in the graveyard. To where if they went to Wandering Emperor, now Drowning the Loch is active. Lotus and Discontinuity, can't really do anything about that. Gonna Thoughtseize here to see my opponent's 5 cards, but they Narset's Reversal of my Thoughtseize, which I refuse to let happen. So I'm just gonna drown Narset's Reversal. I want to know what their cards in hand are. We're gonna take the Thought Distortion. I refuse to be Thought Distortioned here. So my opponent has Teferi. I have the possibility here of my opponent goes to plus Teferi, and then I just Sheoldred's Edict. So I'm going to go ahead and try to crack Fabled Passage here before the draw, and Sheoldred's Edict. If my opponent has Discontinuity here, I'm going to feel real bad, and they do not. So my opponent, has a bunch of mana and not really much else. So I'm not really particularly worried about where we are here, except for me doing this cool thing where I draw a bunch of lands. So I'm going to fire up Hive. I'm going to try to attack and get that Memory Deluge out of their graveyard, because I do not need them seeing more cards. But my opponent did draw the Discontinuity, it seems. So you get to completely just fog my attack, and even more punishing, I didn't play the land before I attacked. So now my opponent in their main phase gets to cast this Memory Deluge that I was trying to get rid of. So me Sheoldred's Edicting when I did was important because the card they drew was the Discontinuity. So, I mean, it was the smart play on my part, but man, does that feel just brutal that the next card they draw stopped me from hitting their Memory Deluge. It's also brutal that all I seem to be drawing is land, so it's hard for me to close the game. And my opponent, draws Teferi, Hero of Dominaria, and starts to do the cool thing where they draw and untap 2 Lotus Fields, and then there's not a whole lot I get to do except for scry with Castle Vantress. Putting Memory Deluge on top is important here. Something that I guess I'm not entirely thinking about is I want to pass and cast Memory Deluge on my opponent's turn. That's like the normal line of thinking, but your opponent, when they're the Lotus deck, get to discontinuity for 2 mana on their turn. So sometimes you want to do things on your turn to cause them to have to pay the full 6 mana to do things. So my opponent's going to resolve their Memory Deluge. I consider just trying to resolve Dig Through Time before they resolve their Memory Deluge, but it's not the path I end up choosing here. That might come back to bite me, because if I try to Dig Through Time here, and my opponent has Memory Deluge, so I actually Dig Through Time here in case my opponent does have discontinuity. That they have to discontinuity with their Shark Typhoon on the stack, and that's not the world I want to live in. I take Mystical Dispute and Drown in the Loch. I don't know why Mystical Dispute was my choice, which obviously if I tried to counter that Shark Typhoon, they just have all the mana in the world. It doesn't do anything. We're at the point in the game where Mystical Dispute is just kind of a very dead card, and I'm 45 seconds behind my opponent. The odds of me winning here get pretty slim, especially since I don't have a way currently to deal with this Teferi, Hero of Dominaria. Potentially flashing back Memory Deluge is probably a path forward, but I wanted to get Chrome Seed Shark into play. I needed a way to generate a clock. My opponent's casting Memory Deluge and making 4/4s. I'm trying to Drown in the Loch their Memory Deluge and making a future 2/2, which is not really trading up in the direction I want to be. When your control opponent has resolved a Shark Typhoon and all you have is a Chrome Seed Shark, you're not really at parity. So my opponent goes for gets a second Shark Typhoon here. I Mystical Dispute just to try to get value and make a 3/3. My opponent pays for it. I'm going to try to make this appear here just to make them spend even more mana to try to get this Shark Typhoon. If they want it, they're going to work for it. But they keep paying for it, and I have the possibility of a 3/3, the possibility of a 2/2, and another 2/2. But my opponent has a 4/4 and a 6/6. Our life totals are not changing, but me being behind on the clock means I'm probably going to lose. I never have a profitable attack here. I possibly should have played Field of Ruin there to field probably their Castle Ardenvale. But I just put Hall of Storm Giants into play because at some point I need to be able to swing with something. And a 7/7 makes more sense than most other things. My opponent, if they're making that much mana and Thought Distortion, they just make 2 6/6s. They hit nothing from me except for a Memory Deluge in my graveyard, which I now have to try to flash back. And the flashback resolves, but I have to take 2 things that are not non-creature spells, or they just get exiled. So I'm just taking a bunch of lands, but I do have the potential of a 4/4 in my future. While my opponent stares at me with I'm looking at a 4/4, a 6/6, a 6/6, and a 6/6. Yeah, this is not looking great. And I took all the board wipes out of my deck. How do I deal with an army of flying sharks? I think the trick here is that I don't. But I hope my opponent has a way to. So I'm going to Siphon Insight, and I hope that my opponent has a Farewell or a Doom Scar just kind of floating around here. And my opponent Test of Talents my Siphon Insight. That is most definitely, absolutely the nail in the coffin here. If I can't take a card out of their deck, I have nothing. So, in the flashiest concession I think I could muster, I'm going to fire up all of my Phyrexian tokens, and I'm going to swing. We're just going for the fences. We're going out in style. I refuse to lose this match as the player that did not attack, but I also only managed to put my opponent to 7, and my opponent returns fire with 30 points of damage here. So at negative 14, I'm definitely dead. So we finished 3-2 and in a very entertaining last round. So I'm going to talk about this deck in the wrap-up. I'll tell you what, I didn't manage to do better than a 3-2, but this deck is sweet. Like, all the cards definitely have a role to play. I never felt like I had too many Thoughtseizes. All my counter spells felt relevant. I never just had a Torrential Gearhulk sit in my hand and not do anything, so that was kind of a good feeling. All the sideboard cards came in at least once, so I would say that's a sign of a good sideboard, is that all the cards felt relevant. Okay, I say that, but I'm pretty sure I didn't bring in Path of Peril. Strike that. But I definitely could see matchups where that one's relevant. Pithing Needle came in, and that was a card that I talked crap about, but it was relevant. And I bet there's a lot of matchups where just having a random Pithing Needle is probably good. So I don't hate it. If you're gonna play some like variation of Dimir Control, this is probably a good list to start on. You can make some changes, like the Negate in the sideboard could probably be any 2-mana counter spell. I kind of fancy maybe like a Test of Talents in this slot. That could be pretty good. Maybe an Aether Gust. Like, I could see mono green maybe being a little tricky. But no, otherwise, like, I like the mana base. I like everything in this deck. And I hope y'all like the video. And if you do, actually like it. Comment on it. Tell me if you hated something about it. Tell me if you saw a play that I could have done better that I didn't see in this like post-league analysis. Definitely subscribe so you know when our next videos come out. The rest of my team makes some great content, and so I hope you enjoy theirs as well. Follow us on Twitter, follow us on Instagram, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. And good luck in your future matches, and I hope that y'all get to enjoy some Dimir Control as much as I do someday. Y'all take care.